Caleb Thornton caught her before she hit the ground. The woman's body folded against his chest like something that had been broken too many times to hold itself together. Blood, still wet, ran from a split above her eyebrow. A crumpled letter fell from her fingers into the dust. He didn't know her name yet, didn't know what she'd survived to get here. But when she opened her eyes, green and wild with fear, and whispered, "Please don't send me back," Caleb Thornton made a decision that would change everything. If you want to hear what happened next, subscribe to our channel, stay with Ellie and Caleb until the very end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The stagecoach was 3 hours late. Caleb Thornton stood on the platform outside the relay office in Copper Bluff, Montana Territory, his hat pulled low against the July sun. He'd been standing there since noon. His boots had worn a path in the dirt from pacing. Frank Delaney, who ran the stage line, leaned against the doorframe, picking his teeth. "Ain't like watching the roads gonna make it come faster, Thornton." "Didn't ask your opinion, Frank. Just saying, you've been out here long enough to grow roots." Frank spat into the dust. "This about that mail-order bride of yours?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Word gets around fast in this town. Town this small? A man orders a wife from back east, folks are gonna talk." Frank grinned. "What kind of woman answers an ad from a man she ain't never met?" "The desperate kind," Caleb said quietly. "Same as the man who wrote it." That shut Frank up. Caleb pulled the advertisement clipping from his vest pocket, though he'd memorized every word months ago. Seeking honest, hard-working woman, willing to build a life in Montana Territory. Rancher, 38, widower, no children. Small homestead, honest work, quiet life. Not looking for love, looking for a partner. He'd written it during the worst of winter, when the silence in his cabin had gotten so loud he couldn't sleep. When the ghost of Sarah, dead 6 years now from the fever that swept through the valley, had stopped being a comfort and started being an accusation. "You're wasting yourself, Caleb. You're dying in inches." He'd posted the letter the next morning before he could change his mind. Then he'd spent 4 months regretting it. The reply came from a Miss Eleanor Prescott of Philadelphia. Her letter was short, formal, and careful. She could cook, sew, keep a household, and tend a garden. She asked for nothing except safe passage and an honest arrangement. She did not mention love. She did not include a photograph. Something about that letter had sat with him. Not what she'd written, what she hadn't. "Dust cloud," Frank said, straightening up. "That'll be her." Caleb's stomach dropped. He took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, put the hat back on. His hands were shaking, and he shoved them into his pockets. "What have I done?" The stagecoach rolled into Copper Bluff, trailing a column of dust that turned the afternoon light amber. The horses were lathered and blowing hard, their sides dark with sweat. The driver hauled back on the reins, and the whole rig groaned to a stop. Caleb stepped forward. The driver climbed down and yanked open the door. "Copper Bluff, end of the line." Nothing happened. Caleb waited. Frank craned his neck. The driver looked inside and said something Caleb couldn't hear. Then a hand appeared, gripping the doorframe. Small, trembling knuckles white. A woman pulled herself out of the coach. She made it one step down before her knees buckled. Caleb moved on instinct. He caught her before she hit the platform, one arm around her waist, the other bracing her shoulders. She weighed almost nothing. Her body folded against him, and he felt the sharp edges of her ribs through the thin fabric of her dress. "Easy," he said. "I got you." She looked up at him. His breath stopped. Her face. It might have been beautiful once, maybe still was, beneath the damage. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes the color of amber in firelight. But a bruise, deep purple and black, spread from her left temple to her cheekbone. A cut above her eyebrow had been stitched clumsily, and her lower lip was swollen, split at the corner. These weren't fresh wounds. They were healing, which meant they'd been worse. "Miss Prescott?" he asked. She flinched at her own name. "Mr. Thornton." "Can you stand?" "I think so." She pushed herself upright, swaying slightly. Her hand went to her bodice and pulled out a folded letter. "You need to read this before anything else." Caleb took the letter. The paper was creased and soft, like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. "Dear Mr. Thornton, the woman who carries this letter has endured circumstances no woman should endure. She comes to you not as a bride, but as a refugee. Miss Prescott's guardian has been made aware of her departure and may attempt to retrieve her. She left of her own free will and in fear for her life. If you cannot offer her safety, please contact our office immediately and we will make alternative arrangements. Under no circumstances should she be returned to her previous household. Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, Director, Western Bride Protective Agency, Philadelphia." Caleb read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his vest pocket next to the advertisement. "Who did this to you?" he asked. Ellie's chin lifted, but her voice cracked. "My half-brother, Vernon." "Your brother did this?" "Half-brother. She stopped. Her eyes darted to Frank, who was watching from the doorway with his mouth open. "I'd rather not discuss it here." "You don't have to discuss it at all," Caleb said. "Not now, not ever, unless you choose to." She stared at him. "You're not going to send me back?" "No, ma'am." "You don't even know what happened." "I know enough." He gestured toward the letter. "That paper says you left because you were scared for your life. That's all I need." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She pressed her lips together hard, the way someone does when they've trained themselves not to break down in front of strangers. "The agency said you were a good man," she whispered. "I reckon that's still to be determined," Caleb said. "But I ain't the kind that hurts women, if that's what you're asking." "That's exactly what I'm asking." "Then you got your answer." A voice cut through from behind them. "Well, well, Caleb Thornton's got himself a woman." Caleb didn't turn. He recognized the voice. Hank Dawson, who owned the feed store and ran his mouth more than his business. "She don't look like much," Hank said, loud enough for the growing cluster of onlookers to hear. "Looks like somebody already threw her away." Ellie went rigid. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Caleb turned slowly. "Hank, just making an observation." "Make it somewhere else." Hank's grin faded. He knew Caleb's reputation. Quiet, steady, and absolutely not a man to push. "Didn't mean nothing by it." "Yeah, you did." Caleb stepped toward him. "And if I hear you say another word about this woman, today, tomorrow, or any day after, you and I are going to have a conversation you won't enjoy. We clear?" Hank swallowed. "Clear." Caleb turned back to Ellie. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Fear, maybe. Or something else. "Let's get you out of here," he said. "My trunk. I'll get it." He turned to Frank. "Her trunk." Frank practically tripped over himself, pulling it off the back of the coach. "Here you go, Thornton. Right here." As Caleb loaded the trunk onto his wagon, a woman stepped out of the restaurant across the street. She was broad-shouldered, gray-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. Ruth Calloway. She crossed the street with purpose, wiping her hands on her apron. "This the girl?" Ruth asked Caleb, not unkindly. "Miss Eleanor Prescott. Miss Prescott, this is Ruth Calloway. She owns the restaurant." Ruth looked at Ellie's face, and something fierce passed through her eyes. She didn't gasp. She didn't look away. She just nodded, the way a woman nods when she recognizes something she's seen before. "You hungry, child?" Ellie blinked. Yes, ma'am. I haven't eaten since yesterday." "Yesterday." Ruth's voice went flat. "Caleb Thornton, this woman hasn't eaten since yesterday, and you're standing here jawing with Hank Dawson?" "I was handle it inside. Both of you. Come." Ruth took Ellie's arm gently, guiding her across the street. "I got stew on the stove and biscuits just out of the oven. You eat first. Everything else can wait." Inside Ruth's restaurant, Ellie sat at a corner table, her back to the wall. Caleb noticed that. She'd chosen the seat where she could see both doors, the seat of someone used to watching for danger. Ruth brought stew, biscuits, and coffee without being asked. She set the plate down in front of Ellie, then pulled up a chair. "Eat slow," Ruth said. "Your stomach ain't used to food right now. Small bites." Ellie picked up the spoon. Her hand trembled. She took one bite, then another, and then she closed her eyes and pressed her hand to her mouth. "It's good," she whispered. "It's so good." Ruth patted her shoulder once, firm and quick, then stood. She caught Caleb's eye and jerked her head toward the kitchen. He followed her. "How bad is it?" Ruth asked, keeping her voice low. "Bad enough. She's got a letter from the bride agency. Says her guardian beat her. Says he might come looking." Ruth's face hardened. What kind of man beats a woman like that? Her half-brother.
"Lord have mercy." Ruth gripped the edge of the counter. "She's skin and bones, Caleb, half-starved. Those bruises are a week old at least, which means they were a lot worse when she left."
"I know."
"Do you?"
Ruth fixed him with a look.
"Because taking her to your ranch is one thing. Knowing what she needs is another. That girl's been broken, Caleb, not just her body. You understand what I'm saying?"
"I understand."
"She's going to flinch when you raise your hand to hang up your hat. She's going to lock her door at night. She's going to test you, probably push you away to see if you're safe. And you're going to have to stand steady through all of it."
Caleb met her eyes. "I buried my wife 6 years ago, Ruth. I know what it means to stand through hard things." Ruth studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded.
"All right, but you bring her back to see me. Regular. That girl needs a woman to talk to, and I'm volunteering."
"I will."
When they came back, Ellie had finished the stew and was holding her coffee cup with both hands, like she was drawing warmth from it despite the summer heat. She looked up at them with wary eyes. "We should head out," Caleb said. "My ranch is about 8 miles. We'll lose the light if we wait." Ellie stood. She turned to Ruth. "Thank you, ma'am, for the food, and for not—" she hesitated. "For not staring." Ruth took both of Ellie's hands in hers. "You listen to me, child. Whatever happened to you, it ain't your shame to carry. You hear me? It ain't yours." Ellie's chin trembled. She nodded quickly, pulled her hands free, and walked toward the door. Caleb helped her onto the wagon. She sat straight-backed on the bench, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes forward. He climbed up beside her, took the reins, and clicked his tongue. The horses moved. They rode in silence for 2 miles. The trail wound through open grassland, the mountains rising blue and distant to the west. Caleb kept his eyes on the road and let her be. Finally, she spoke. "You haven't asked me what I did to deserve it." "Because you didn't do anything to deserve it." "Most people assume—" "I ain't most people." He glanced at her. "And whoever told you that you deserve being beaten is a liar." She was quiet for a long time. "Vernon, my half-brother, he inherited everything when our father died. The house, the money, the business. Father's will said Vernon was to be my guardian until I married." Her voice was flat, controlled, like she was reading someone else's story. "Vernon gambled most of the money away within 2 years. When creditors came, he decided I was the solution. He arranged a marriage to a man named Douglas Fairley, a business partner, 53 years old.
And you refused.
I refused. She touched her cheek. Vernon explained what happens to women who refuse.
Caleb's hands tightened on the reins until the leather creaked.
How long?
How long what? How long did he hurt you?
3 years. She said it simply, without self-pity. It started small, a slap here, a shove there. I told myself it was grief, that he was struggling with father's death. But it got worse, much worse. The night I left, She stopped. You don't have to. He broke my rib. She said it like she was reporting the weather. 2, actually. The doctor at the agency said 2. He broke my ribs because I dropped a teacup. His mother's teacup. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. Ellie looked at him with alarm. What's wrong?
Nothing's wrong. His voice was rough. I just need a minute. He sat there, hands on the reins, breathing slow and deliberate. The rage inside him was white hot, and he wasn't going to let her see it. She'd seen enough anger from men to last a lifetime. She didn't need his. Are you angry at me? She asked quietly. No, Ellie. He turned to her. I'm angry for you. There's a difference. She tilted her head, studying him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. You're a strange man, Mr. Thornton. Caleb. Caleb. She tested the name. You're a strange man, Caleb. So I've been told. The ranch appeared as they crested the last hill. A sturdy cabin beside a creek. A barn, a corral with 2 horses, and a milk cow. Not grand, not much, but solid. Here it is, he said. Ain't fancy. Ellie looked at it for a long time. Does it have a door that locks? It does. Does anyone else live here? Just me, and now you. Then it's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Inside, Caleb showed her the spare room. A bed, a dresser, a window facing the mountains. This is yours. Door's got a bolt on the inside. You lock it at night if it makes you feel safe. She ran her hand over the bolt. You put this on for me? Put it on yesterday. She looked at him, and for the first time, her eyes softened. Thank you. There's one more thing, Caleb said. He reached behind the dresser and pulled out a small pistol, a Colt pocket revolver. This is loaded. You keep it in your nightstand. Ellie stared at the gun. You're giving me a weapon? I'm giving you a choice. Any man comes through that door without your permission. You have the right to stop him, including me. Including you. Including me. She took the gun. Her hands didn't tremble this time. She checked the cylinder like someone who'd seen it done before, then placed it carefully in the nightstand drawer. My father taught me to shoot when I was 12, she said. Vernon sold all the guns after father died. Of course he did, Caleb said, his voice dark. A man like that don't want a woman who can fight back. No, Ellie agreed. He doesn't. They had supper that evening in near silence. Caleb had made beans and cornbread. Nothing special, but Ellie ate every bite. He noticed she ate fast, hunched over her plate, guarding her food with her forearm. You could have read that letter and put me right back on the coach. Caleb leaned against the counter. 6 years ago, my wife died. Fever took her in 3 days. I couldn't do a damn thing about it. Couldn't save her. Couldn't help her. Just watched her go. He paused. I swore I'd never be useless again. Never stand by while someone suffered if I could do something about it. So I'm a project, she said, an edge creeping into a way to ease your guilt. No, he looked at her directly. You're a person who needs help, and I'm a person who can give it. That's all this has to be. Ellie held his gaze for a long moment. Then something in her face shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the first crack in the wall. I keep a knife in my sleeve, she said suddenly. I have since I left Philadelphia. I sleep with it under my pillow. I need you to know that. Caleb didn't flinch. All right. It doesn't bother you? It tells me you're a survivor. That don't bother me one bit. Ellie exhaled slowly. She stood, pushed in her chair, and walked to her room. At the door, she turned back. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Ellie. She stepped inside. He heard the bolt slide shut. Then, silence. Caleb stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the creak outside and the settling of the cabin around him. He thought about the bruises on her face, the ribs her own brother had broken, the knife she kept in her sleeve because the world had taught her that safety was something you carried, not something you were given. He thought about Sarah, who had died in the bed 20 feet from where he stood. About 6 years of silence and ghosts, and a loneliness so thick it had nearly swallowed him. And he thought about the woman on the other side of that bolted door. Broken, starved, bruised, and still fierce enough to carry a knife, check a gun cylinder, and look him dead in the eye when she asked why he was helping her. Ellie Prescott was not what he'd expected. She was so much more. Caleb blew out the lamp and lay down on his bed. For the first time in 6 years, his cabin wasn't silent. Through the wall, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of quiet weeping. Not loud, not dramatic. The careful, muffled crying of a woman who had learned to grieve without making a sound. He didn't go to her. She didn't need a man at her door tonight. She needed a locked room, a loaded gun, and the freedom to fall apart without being watched. So Caleb Thornton lay in the dark, listening to a stranger cry through the wall, and made a promise that settled into his bones like iron. Whatever was coming for her, whoever was coming, they'd have to go through him first. And God help them when they did. 3 days passed before Ellie unlocked her bedroom door during daylight hours. Caleb didn't push. He left food outside her room, biscuits, jerky, a tin cup of water, and went about his work. He heard her moving inside, heard the floorboards creak, heard the bolt slide back just long enough for her to take the plate, then it would slide shut again. On the 4th morning, he woke to the smell of coffee. Ellie stood at the stove, her back straight, her hair pulled into a tight braid. She'd rolled up her sleeves to her elbows without thinking. When she heard him, she turned, and he saw the marks. Scars, not bruises, those were fading. These were older, thin, white lines across both forearms, layered over each other like tallies on a prison wall. Some were straight, deliberate. Others were jagged, the kind left by a belt buckle or a strap. She saw where he was looking. Her hands dropped, and she yanked her sleeves down so fast she knocked the coffee pot sideways. "Don't," she said. I didn't say anything. "You were going to." "No," Caleb said. "I wasn't." He walked past her, righted the coffee pot, and poured 2 cups. He set one in front of her. "You make good coffee." Ellie stared at him. He could see her calculating, waiting for the follow-up, the question, the demand for an explanation. When it didn't come, something in her shoulders loosened by half an inch. "My mother taught me," she said finally. "She said bad coffee was a sin worse than lying." "Smart woman." "She was." Ellie picked up her cup. "She died when I was 14. Consumption." "My wife died of fever,"
Caleb said. 6 years back. I know. The agency told me. They drank their coffee in silence. It was the first time since she'd arrived that the quiet between them felt like something shared instead of something endured. After breakfast, Caleb headed for the barn. He was halfway across the yard when Ellie appeared in the doorway. I want to help, she said. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She stepped off the porch. I can't sit in that room one more day, Caleb. I'll go mad. He studied her. The bruise on her cheek had faded to yellow. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been 3 days ago, and there was a set to her jaw that told him arguing would be useless. Can you milk a cow? I can learn. All right then, come on. That morning, Ellie learned to milk. She was terrible at it. The cow kicked the bucket twice, and Ellie cursed under her breath in a way that made Caleb bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. She hates me, Ellie said, wiping milk off her face. She don't hate you. She's testing you. Cows do that. Cows and men, Ellie muttered, and Caleb did laugh then, a short bark of surprise that echoed off the barn walls. Ellie looked at him, startled. Then a smile crept across her face, small, careful, like she was remembering how. That's the first time I've heard you laugh, she said. Been a while since anything was funny. How long? 6 years, give or take. Ellie looked at the cow, then back at him. Well, I suppose getting kicked in the face by a cow is a good enough reason to start again. By the end of the first week, Ellie had taken over the kitchen, the chickens, and the garden. She worked like someone trying to outrun her own thoughts, relentless, focused, barely stopping to eat. Caleb recognized the pattern because he'd lived it himself after Sarah died. Work until your body aches so bad your mind can't keep screaming. He let her push. He knew she needed it. But on the 8th day, she pushed too far. Caleb came in from the field to find her on her knees in the garden, one arm wrapped around her ribs, her breathing sharp and shallow. Ellie, I'm fine. You're not fine. You're holding your ribs. They're just sore. The ones your brother broke? She flinched. They're healing. Have they been looked at? Properly? The agency doctor. That was weeks ago. Caleb crouched beside her. We've got a doctor here, Doc Bridges. He drinks more than he ought to. But his hands are steady, and he knows what he's doing. I don't need a doctor. Ellie, I said I don't need, and I'm saying those ribs ain't healed right if you're still doubled over after pulling weeds. His voice was firm, but not hard. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm asking. Please let Doc look at you. She knelt there, breathing through the pain, fighting the instinct to refuse. Caleb waited. He'd learned that pushing Ellie was like pushing a barn cat. The harder you pressed, the faster she ran. Will you be there? She asked quietly. If you want me to be. I don't want to be alone with a man I don't know. Then I'll be there. Doc Samuel Bridges arrived the next afternoon, carrying his black bag and smelling faintly of whiskey. He was 60, white-haired, with a limp from an old war wound, and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Caleb met him on the porch. Thanks for coming out, Doc. You said it was your wife? She's not my wife. Not yet. It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated, Thornton. Doc Bridges eyed him. What am I walking into? A woman who's been beaten badly. Broken ribs, maybe 6 weeks old. Bruises on her face, mostly healed, and... He hesitated. Scars on her arms. Old ones. A lot of them. Doc's face went still. Who did it? Her half-brother back east. He's still breathing? Unfortunately. Shame. Doc shifted his bag. All right, let's see her. Inside, Ellie sat at the kitchen table with her hands folded, rigid as a fence post. She'd put on her best dress, as if this were a formal occasion, and Caleb's chest ached at the thought of her preparing herself to be examined like she was preparing for battle. "Miss Prescott," Doc said, removing his hat. "I'm Samuel Bridges. Folks call me Doc. I've been patching up the people of Copper Bluff for 22 years, and I've yet to lose one who didn't deserve losing." Ellie's mouth twitched. "That's not very reassuring." "Wasn't meant to be. It was meant to make you smile. And it worked." He set his bag on the table. "Now, Caleb tells me you've got some ribs that ain't happy. Mind if I take a look?" "Caleb stays," Ellie said immediately. "Caleb stays," Doc agreed. "I'm going to need you to take a few deep breaths for me first. Can you do that?" She tried. The third breath hitched, and she grabbed her side. Doc nodded. "That's what I thought. I need to feel along the ribs. I'll tell you exactly where my hands are going before I put them there. You say stop, I stop. Deal?" "Deal." Caleb stood by the window, arms crossed, watching Doc work with gentle precision. He narrated everything. "I'm touching your left side now, fourth rib, pressing lightly." And Ellie bore it with clenched teeth and white knuckles. When Doc asked her to roll up her sleeves, the room went very quiet. Ellie looked at Caleb. "You don't have to," Caleb said. "He needs to see," she said flatly. She rolled them up. Doc Bridges looked at her arms for a long time. He didn't react, didn't gasp or grimace or shake his head. He just took her wrist gently, turned it over, and examined each scar with clinical calm. "Belt?" he asked. "Belt buckle," Ellie said. "And a fireplace poker. Once, a letter opener." Caleb's hands were shaking. He shoved them under his arms. "How long, Miss Prescott?" 3 years. Doc set her hand down carefully. "Your ribs are healing, but the left fourth is slightly displaced. I can wrap them properly, which will help. The older injuries—" He paused, choosing his words. "You've got damage to your left wrist that tells me it was broken at some point and set badly. Can you make a full fist?" Ellie tried. Her fingers curled about 3/4 of the way. "That's what I thought. Not much I can do about that now. But the ribs, the bruising, you'll heal. You're young and you're strong." He looked at her directly. "And you're safe here. I've known Caleb Thornton for 15 years, and he's the most stubborn, honest, boring man in this territory." "Thank you, Doc," Caleb said dryly. "I mean it as a compliment." Doc stood, snapping his bag shut. "I'll leave some willow bark tea for the pain. Miss Prescott, I want to see you again in 2 weeks. And eat more. You need meat on those bones." "That's what Ruth keeps telling me." "Ruth Calloway's smarter than all of us put together. Listen to her." Doc put on his hat and turned to Caleb. "Walk me out?" On the porch, Doc's easy manner dropped like a mask. His face was granite. "That woman's been tortured, Caleb. Not just beaten. Tortured. Those scars are systematic. Whoever did that to her enjoyed it." "I know." "The wrist was broken and healed without proper setting, which means he either kept her from a doctor or the doctor was complicit. Some of those scars are years old. She's been living in hell." "I know, Doc." "No, you don't." Doc gripped his arm. "I've seen soldiers after 3 years in Confederate prison camps who look better than that girl's arms. Whatever you think you know about what she's been through, it's worse. Much worse." Caleb's jaw ached from clenching. "What do I do?" "Exactly what you're doing. Give her space. Let her set the pace. Don't push her to talk about it, but don't shy away when she does." Doc paused. "And Caleb, if her brother comes looking for her, you better be ready. A man who does that to a woman doesn't stop just because she left." "He comes here, I'll be ready." "I know you will. That's what worries me." Doc mounted his horse.
2 weeks, Caleb. Bring her to town." The day settled into a rhythm after that, and the rhythm was good. Ellie cooked breakfast before dawn. Caleb worked the fields. They met at midday for a quiet meal, then Ellie tended the garden while Caleb handled the animals. Evenings they sat on the porch if the weather held, or by the fire if it didn't. They talked more now. Not about the past. That subject sat between them like a sleeping animal neither wanted to wake. But about the present. The garden, the animals, the weather. The little details of building a life side by side. Ellie had opinions about everything. She thought his method of planting corn was inefficient. She told him his bread was terrible and took over baking entirely. She rearranged the kitchen twice in 1 week and organized the root cellar by some system he couldn't follow. "You moved the flour again," Caleb said one morning, opening 3 different cabinets. "It makes more sense next to the sugar." "It made sense where it was." "It made sense to you. You also think socks belong in the kitchen drawer." "They were clean socks." "They were in the kitchen, Caleb." He found the flour. He also found himself smiling for the second time that week, which was more than he'd smiled in the previous 6 years combined. On a Tuesday, Caleb's sister rode in unannounced. Margaret Maggie Thornton Blake was 42, sharp-tongued, and had the Thornton stubbornness dialed up to a degree that made Caleb look easygoing. She and her husband Jim ran the neighboring ranch, and she'd been telling Caleb he was wasting his life for the better part of a decade. She dismounted, tied her horse, and walked through the front door without knocking. "So," she said, looking around the cabin, "where is she?" "Hello to you too, Maggie." "Don't hello me. The whole territory's been talking for 2 weeks about Caleb Thornton's mail-order bride, and I have to hear it from Hank Dawson at the feed store." She put her hands on her hips. "Hank Dawson, Caleb." "I was going to tell you." "When? Christmas?" Ellie appeared in the doorway of her room, drawn by the commotion. She took one look at Maggie and went very still. Maggie turned. Her eyes swept over Ellie, the fading bruises, the thin frame, the wary stance, and her expression shifted from indignation to something softer. Not pity, recognition. "You must be Eleanor," Maggie said. "Ellie." Her voice was guarded. "Ellie, then. I'm Maggie, Caleb's sister. He didn't tell you about me, did he?" "He mentioned a sister. He said you were—" Ellie glanced at Caleb. "Persistent." "That's the polite version of what he said, I'm sure." Maggie crossed the room and extended her hand. Not for a handshake. She took Ellie's hand in both of hers and held it. "Welcome to Montana, Ellie. I hope my brother's been treating you decently." "He has. Very much so." "Good, because if he hasn't, I'll beat him senseless myself." Maggie squeezed her hand and let go. "Now, I brought pie. Caleb can't bake to save his life, and I figured you could use some proper food." Over pie and coffee, Maggie talked enough for all 3 of them. She told stories about growing up on the Thornton family homestead, about Caleb as a stubborn boy who once refused to come inside during a blizzard because he'd promised his horse he'd sleep in the barn. Ellie listened with wide eyes, and Caleb sat red-faced, grumbling into his coffee. "He was always like this," Maggie said, leaning toward Ellie. "Quiet, stubborn, loyal to a fault. After Sarah died, he just shut down. Stopped coming to Sunday dinner. Stopped talking to anyone. I thought he was going to disappear into this cabin and never come out." "Maggie," Caleb warned. "She deserves to know who she's living with," Maggie said firmly. 6 years, Ellie. 6 years he's been out here alone, punishing himself for something that wasn't his fault. The fever took half the valley that winter.
But Caleb decided it was his personal failure because he couldn't save one woman. The room went quiet. Caleb stared at the table. "A kind of guilt," Ellie said softly. "The kind where you know it's not rational, but it lives in you anyway." Caleb looked up. Their eyes met. "Yeah," he said roughly. "That's exactly what it is." Maggie watched the exchange with sharp eyes and said nothing, which was remarkable for Maggie. When she left an hour later, she pulled Caleb aside by the corral. "I like her." "You like everyone." "I do not. I don't like Hank Dawson. I don't like Frank Delaney. And I didn't like Sarah much when you first brought her home either, though I came around." She fixed him with the Thornton stare. "That woman in there isn't broken, Caleb. She's bent. There's a difference. And she's already straightening up." "I know." "Do you? Because I see the way you look at her. And I see the way she looks at you when you're not watching." Maggie poked his chest. "Don't you dare close yourself off again. Don't you dare use Sarah's memory as an excuse to keep that woman at arm's length." "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that. You're terrified of caring about someone because the last person you cared about died. And she's terrified of trusting someone because the last person she trusted beat her half to death. You're both hiding behind your wounds like they're shields." She softened. "Let her in, Caleb, and let yourself out." She mounted her horse and rode off before he could answer, which was also typical Maggie. That evening, Caleb sat on the porch cleaning his rifle. Ellie came out and sat beside him, closer than she'd ever sat before. Not touching, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her. "Your sister's a force," she said. "That's one word for it." "She loves you very much." "She's got a funny way of showing it." Ellie watched him work the rifle for a while. "Caleb, I want to learn." "Learn what?" "To shoot. Properly. I told you my father taught me when I was a girl, but that was a long time ago. If Vernon comes—" She paused. "I don't want to be helpless again." Caleb set the rifle down. "You sure?" "I'm sure. We start tomorrow." The next morning, Caleb set up tin cans on fence posts along the far edge of the property. He brought out 2 guns, his Winchester rifle, and the Colt pocket revolver he'd given her. "We start with the pistol," he said. "It's what you'll carry. Rifles for distance." He showed her the stance, the grip, the breathing. She listened with fierce concentration, absorbing everything. "Both hands," he said. "Steady. Don't yank the trigger. Squeeze it, like you're closing your hand, real slow." Ellie raised the pistol. Her first shot went wide by 3 feet. Again. Her second shot hit dirt. Again. Third shot clipped the fence post. Fourth shot knocked a can sideways. "Good," Caleb said. "I missed." "You hit the post." "I was aiming for the can." "And now you know where your aim pulls. Adjust." Again. She fired again. The can spun off the post and landed in the grass. Ellie lowered the gun. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were blazing. "Again," she said. They practiced for an hour. By the end, Ellie was hitting 3 out of 5 cans consistently. She was a natural. Her father had taught her well, and muscle memory was a powerful thing. But it was the last shot that changed everything. Caleb was standing behind her, adjusting her elbow, when his hand brushed her waist. Ellie went rigid. Every muscle locked. Her breathing stopped. Caleb pulled his hand back like he'd touched a hot stove. "Sorry, I'm sorry I didn't—" "No." Ellie exhaled shakily. "No, you startled me, that's all. I should have asked before I—" "Caleb." She turned to face him. They were standing close. Too close, maybe, but neither moved. It wasn't you. It's never been you. It's just, my body remembers things my mind is trying to forget. I understand. Do you? More than you think. He held her gaze. After Sarah died, I couldn't sleep in our bed for 2 years. My body remembered her being there. The empty space was louder than any sound. Ellie's eyes searched his face. We're a pair, aren't we? Both carrying ghosts. Reckon we are. She reached out slowly, deliberately, and put her hand on his forearm. It was the first time she'd touched him voluntarily. Her fingers were warm and calloused from a week of garden work. Thank you for teaching me, she said. You're a good shot. I mean, thank you for all of it. The room, the gun, the bolt on the door, the fact that you haven't once tried to touch me without permission. Her voice dropped. You have no idea how rare that is. It shouldn't be rare. No, it shouldn't. But it is. She held his arm for a moment longer, then let go and walked back toward the cabin. At the door, she stopped. Caleb? Yeah? I unlocked my door last night, for the first time since I got here. She went inside before he could respond. Caleb stood in the yard, the sun warm on his face, the pistol still in his hand, and felt something crack open inside his chest that had been sealed shut for 6 years. The following Saturday, they rode into Copper Bluff for supplies. Word had spread about Caleb's bride. It always did in a town this small. And people watched as they pulled up to the general store. Some with curiosity, some with suspicion, a few with something uglier. At the store, Martha Hadley, the preacher's wife, cornered Ellie near the fabric bolts. So you're the one who answered Caleb Thornton's advertisement. I am. Brave choice, coming all the way from Philadelphia to live with a stranger. Martha's eyes lingered on the fading bruise. Though I suppose when a woman's desperate enough, she'll go anywhere. Ellie's chin lifted. I suppose she will. Desperation has a way of clarifying what matters. And what matters to you, dear? Safety, honest work, being treated like a human being. Ellie met her gaze. Things I'm told are quite common in Montana. Martha opened her mouth, but Ruth Calloway materialized like a thunderclap in an apron. Martha Hadley, don't you have altar flowers to arrange? I was just welcoming. You were just leaving. Ruth's voice could have frozen a creek in August. Martha huffed and swept out. Ruth turned to Ellie. Don't mind her. She's been miserable since 1862 and wants company. I can handle her. I can see that, Ruth smiled. You're tougher than you look, child. I've had practice. Outside, Caleb was loading the wagon when a rider came tearing down the main street at a full gallop. The horse was lathered, wild-eyed, and the man on its back reined to a stop so hard the animal nearly sat back on its haunches. It was Jim Blake, Maggie's husband. Caleb! Jim swung down, breathing hard. A man came by our place an hour ago, well-dressed, from back east, asking about a young woman. Said she was his sister. Said she'd been taken against her will. Caleb's blood went cold. What did you tell him? Told him I didn't know what he was talking about. But Caleb, he had another man with him, rough-looking, armed. They're headed for town. Caleb looked through the store window. Ellie stood at the counter with Ruth, laughing about something. Light and unguarded and alive. He had maybe an hour, maybe less. Jim, take Ellie to your ranch. Don't tell her why. Tell her Maggie wants to show her something. Caleb, do it now. Jim hesitated, then nodded and went inside. Caleb climbed down from the wagon and walked to the sheriff's office. His stride was even. His hands were steady. But inside his chest, a fury was building that he hadn't felt since the day he'd buried his wife and put his fist through the cabin wall. Vernon Prescott was coming, and Caleb Thornton was done being a man who couldn't protect the people he cared about. Sheriff Wade Hartley was sitting behind his desk, cleaning a shotgun, when Caleb pushed through the door. Hartley was 50, lean as rawhide, with a silver and the kind of eyes that had seen men at their worst, and still chose to believe in the law. He'd been a U.S. Marshal before his knee gave out, and he ran Copper Bluff with a quiet authority that most folks had the good sense not to test. "Thornton," Hartley said without looking up, "you look like a man about to do something stupid. There's a man coming into town, maybe already here, well-dressed from back east, traveling with hired muscle. He's looking for Ellie." Hartley set the shotgun down. "Her brother?" "Half-brother. Vernon Prescott. He beat her bad enough to break her ribs, Wade. Beat her for years. She ran, and now he's tracked her here."
"He got legal claim on her?" "He was her guardian under her father's will." "She's how old?" 24. "Then she's a grown woman, and guardianship don't mean a damn thing." Hartley stood, reaching for his hat. "Unless he's got a judge's order saying otherwise. He's got money. Money buys judges." "Not in my town it don't." Hartley strapped on his gun belt. "Where's the girl now?" "Jim Blake's taking her to Maggie's ranch." "Good. She's safe there for now." Hartley walked to the window and looked down the street. "You said he's got someone with him. What kind of someone?" "Jim said rough-looking, armed." "A hired gun." "That's my guess." Hartley turned back to Caleb. "I want you to hear me clearly, Thornton. Whatever happens, you let me handle this. I know you're angry. I know you want to tear this man apart. But if you put your hands on him, he's the one with legal standing, and you're the one in my jail. Understand?" "I understand." "Do you? Because your fists are clenched so hard your knuckles are white." Caleb forced his hands open. "I understand, Wade. All right, let's go see what we're dealing with." They didn't have to wait long. 2 riders appeared at the south end of town 15 minutes later. The first was a man in a dark suit, clean-shaven, with the kind of face that might have been handsome if it weren't so sharp. He rode like a man who'd learned in a park, not on a trail. Everything about him screamed money and contempt. The second man was built like a freight wagon, thick-necked, unshaved, wearing a long duster despite the summer heat. A Schofield revolver hung low on his hip, tied down gunfighter style. His eyes swept the street with the dead calm of a man accustomed to violence. They tied up outside the saloon. The well-dressed man brushed dust off his sleeve and looked around Copper Bluff like a man inspecting something he'd already decided to buy. "That him?" Hartley asked. "Never met him, but I know it in my gut." "Stay behind me." They crossed the street. Hartley's badge caught the light, and the well-dressed man noticed it immediately. He smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Sheriff, good afternoon. My name is Vernon Prescott, of Philadelphia. This is my associate, Mr. Silas Cobb." He produced a calling card with a little flourish. "I'm here on a family matter." "I know why you're here, Mr. Prescott." Vernon's smile flickered. "News travels fast." "Small town. What do you want?" "My sister, half-sister to be precise. Eleanor Prescott. She left Philadelphia some weeks ago under circumstances I'd rather not air publicly. She's young, impressionable, and I'm afraid she's been taken advantage of by an unscrupulous mail-order bride operation." "Taken advantage of," Caleb repeated. Vernon's eyes shifted to him. "I'm sorry, and you are?" "Caleb Thornton, the man she came to." Something moved behind Vernon's polished expression, a flicker of calculation, reassessment. He looked Caleb up and down with undisguised contempt. "Ah, the rancher," Vernon's lip curled. "The man who purchased my sister from a catalog." "I didn't purchase anyone. She came of her own free will." "She's a disturbed young woman, Mr. Thornton. She's suffered episodes of hysteria since our father's death. She invents stories,
makes wild accusations. I've been responsible for her care, and I'm here to take her home." "Home?" Caleb stepped forward. Hartley's arm came up, blocking him. "You call what you did to her care?" Vernon's face didn't change. "I don't know what she's told you, but Eleanor has a history of self-harm. Those injuries she's carrying, she inflicted them on herself. It's part of her condition." "She broke her own ribs," Caleb said flatly. "She threw herself down a staircase. I had 3 witnesses. 3 witnesses you paid." "Careful, Mr. Thornton." Vernon's voice went cold. "Slander is a serious matter." Hartley stepped between them. "Mr. Prescott, the woman is 24 years old. She's in Montana territory of her own volition. Whatever guardianship arrangement you had back east doesn't carry legal weight here." Vernon reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. "On the contrary, Sheriff, I have a court order from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania declaring Eleanor Prescott mentally incompetent and placing her under my permanent guardianship. Signed by Judge Harold Whitfield of the Philadelphia County Court." He held it out. "It carries weight everywhere." Hartley took the document. He read it slowly, his face betraying nothing. Caleb's stomach dropped. "Wade, give me a minute." Hartley read it again. "This says she was declared incompetent in March of this year." "Correct. 2 months before she disappeared." "Convenient timing," Caleb said. "The timing was dictated by her escalating episodes. I acted out of concern for her well-being." Hartley folded the document. "This may or may not hold up in Montana territory, Mr. Prescott. Federal territories have their own jurisdictions. I'll need to send this to the territorial judge in Helena for review." "And how long will that take?" "Could be a week, could be a month." Vernon's composure cracked for the first time. "A month? Sheriff, my sister is living with a stranger, a man she's known for barely 3 weeks. Surely you can appreciate—" "What I appreciate," Hartley said, cutting him off, "is that a woman showed up in my town with bruises on her face and broken ribs, and now the man she says did it is standing in front of me with a piece of paper saying she's crazy." He tucked the document into his vest. "I'll hold on to this. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay in Copper Bluff, but you will not approach Miss Prescott. You will not go near Thornton's ranch, and if I catch your associate here causing trouble, I'll put him in a cell so fast he'll think he was born there." Silas Cobb spoke for the first time. His voice was low and gravelly. "You threatening me, Sheriff? I'm informing you. There's a difference, though men like you don't usually know it." Cobb stared at Hartley with flat, empty eyes. Then he smiled. "Whatever you say, Sheriff." Vernon straightened his jacket. "Very well, we'll wait, but I trust this matter will be resolved promptly. I've come a very long way." "So did she," Caleb said, "running from you." Vernon looked at him, and in that look, Caleb saw it. The real man behind the polished mask. Cold, calculating, possessive. The kind of man who didn't see people, only property. "You don't know my sister, Mr. Thornton," Vernon said softly. "You know the story she's told you." And Eleanor has always been a very good storyteller. They turned and walked into the saloon. The doors swung shut behind them. Caleb's hands were trembling. "That court order, Wade." "It's a problem," Hartley admitted. "If it's legitimate, it gives him legal standing to take her back." "It's not legitimate. He bought that judge." "Maybe. Probably. But proving that takes time and lawyers, neither of which grows on trees in Montana. So what do we do?" Hartley looked at him squarely. "There's one thing that overrides a guardianship order, even from back east." "What?" "Marriage. A married woman falls under her husband's household. If she's your wife, Prescott's guardianship is void." Caleb went still. "She's not ready for that." "Then she better get ready, Because that paper he's carrying is the only weapon he needs, and right now, he's got it, and we don't. Caleb rode hard to Maggie's ranch. The sun was dropping low, throwing long shadows across the trail, and Elle felt like 10. His mind churned through every word Vernon had spoken, every calculated smile, every poisoned lie. She inflicted them on herself. The fury in Caleb's chest burned so hot he could barely breathe. He found Ellie on Maggie's porch, shelling peas with his sister. She looked up when he rode in, and the moment she saw his face, the color drained from hers. "He's here," she said. Not a question. Caleb dismounted. "He's here. Got a man with him. Armed." Ellie's hands stopped moving. The bowl of peas sat forgotten in her lap. "Did he have papers?" "A court order. Says you're mentally incompetent. Signed by a judge in Philadelphia." Ellie closed her eyes. "Judge Whitfield." "You knew about this?" "Vernon threatened it for months. Told me if I ever tried to leave, he'd have me committed. I didn't think he'd actually—" She pressed her hand to her mouth. "He told the judge I was hysterical, that I harmed myself, that I invented stories." "Is any of it true?" Ellie's eyes snapped open, and the look she gave him nearly cut him in half. "You're asking me that?" "I have to, Ellie. Not because I believe him. Because if this goes before a territorial judge, that's what they'll ask. And I need to know what we're fighting." She stood up. The peas scattered across the porch. "No, none of it is true. Every scar on my body was put there by Vernon Prescott. Every bruise, every broken bone. The judge who signed that order plays cards with Vernon every Thursday. He was at the dinner where Vernon tried to sell me to Douglas Fairley, like livestock." "All right." "All right? That's all you have to say?" "I believe you," Caleb said. "I believed you before I asked, and I believe you now. But I needed to hear you say it so I know exactly where we stand." Ellie stared at him, chest heaving. Maggie had risen from her chair and stood in the doorway, watching. "There's something else," Caleb said carefully. "Hartley says a guardianship order doesn't apply to a married woman. If we—" "No. Ellie, no. I didn't come here to be forced into another arrangement by another man's threats. I won't do it. I'm not forcing you. I'm telling you what Hartley told me. And I'm telling you that I refuse to let Vernon dictate the terms of my life one more time." Her voice shook, but her spine was steel. "If I marry you, it will be because I choose to, not because I'm running." "You're already running," Maggie said quietly from the doorway. Ellie turned on her. "What?" "You've been running since you left Philadelphia. Running's not the same as choosing, but sometimes you have to do one to get to the other." Maggie stepped onto the porch. "I'm not saying marry my brother because a piece of paper tells you to. I'm saying don't refuse to marry him just because you're afraid of doing something on someone else's timeline. It's not that simple." "Honey, nothing worth doing is simple." Maggie looked at Caleb. "You two need to talk. Alone. Jim and I will be inside." She went in and closed the door. Caleb and Ellie stood on the porch as the sky turned purple. "I won't pretend this is normal," Caleb said. "It's not. Nothing about this is how I wanted it to go." "How did you want it to go?" "I wanted—" He stopped, rubbed the back of his neck. "I wanted to give you time. A whole summer, if that's what you needed. I wanted you to wake up one morning and realize you were safe, and that you could decide your life without anyone pushing you. I wanted whatever happened between us to happen because you wanted it, not because some monster from your past backed you into a corner." Ellie watched him struggle with the words, and something shifted in her face. "You care about me," she said. "You know I do." "Say it. I need to hear it. Not about safety, not about duty, about me." Caleb looked at her. The woman who'd stumbled off a stagecoach with blood on her face and a letter in her hand. The woman who kept a knife in her sleeve and checked gun cylinders and fought her own brother's lies with nothing but the truth. The woman who'd reorganized his kitchen twice and told him his bread was terrible, and unlocked her door for the first time in 3 weeks because she was starting to trust a man again. I care about you, Ellie. Not because you need saving. Because every day you're in that cabin, it feels less like surviving and more like living. You make me want to be more than what I've been. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away hard, angry at herself for crying. If I do this, she said slowly, it's not because of Vernon. It's not because of the court order. It's because in 3 weeks, you've shown me more decency than I've known in 10 years. And I think, her voice cracked, I think I could love you, Caleb Thornton, given enough time. We'll have time. Promise me. I promise. She nodded once. Then let's do it. Tomorrow morning, before Vernon can stop us. Ellie, are you sure? She stepped toward him, reached up, and put her hand on his face. Her palm was rough with calluses and warm from the evening air. I'm sure, she said. They sent word to Pastor Whitman that night. Hartley agreed to stand witness and to keep an eye on Vernon and Cobb in the meantime. Maggie took charge of everything else with the efficiency of a cavalry general. But sleep didn't come easy. Ellie lay in Maggie's spare room, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would marry a man she'd known for 3 weeks, a man who'd given her a locked door, a loaded gun, and the first kindness she'd felt since her mother died. Was that love? She didn't know. Was it enough? It had to be, because the alternative was Vernon. The alternative was going back. She pressed her hand against the nightstand where the Colt revolver sat. Still loaded. Still hers. Caleb had never asked for it back. That, more than anything, was why she'd said yes. Morning came fast. Caleb arrived at Maggie's ranch just after dawn, wearing a clean shirt with his hair combed and his boots polished. He looked nervous, which Ellie found oddly comforting. She wore a dress Maggie had altered overnight, plain blue cotton with a white collar, the best they could manage. You look beautiful, Caleb said when she came out. You look terrified. Both things can be true. They rode in the Copper Bluff together. The town was quiet, most folks still at breakfast, but as they approached the church, Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. Vernon Prescott stood on the church steps. He was freshly shaved, impeccably dressed, and blocking the door with the casual authority of a man who owned the building. Silas Cobb leaned against the hitching post nearby, picking his nails with a knife. "Good morning, Eleanor," Vernon said pleasantly. "Going somewhere?" Ellie's hand found Caleb's arm. Her fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. "Move," Caleb said. "I'd like a word with my sister first." "She's got nothing to say to you." "Eleanor." Vernon descended one step. "I've come 2,000 miles for you. The least you can do is speak to me." Ellie let go of Caleb's arm. She climbed down from the wagon. Caleb reached for her. "Ellie, don't. I need to do this," she said without looking back. She walked toward the church. Each step cost her something. Caleb could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way her hands trembled at her sides. But she walked. She didn't stop until she was 3 feet from Vernon, close enough to see every line in his face. "Hello, Vernon." "Eleanor, you look well. Better than I expected, given the circumstances." His eyes swept over her dress, her braided hair, her sun-browned skin. "Plain pioneer woman. How charming." "I'm getting married." "To the rancher?" Vernon's lip curled. "To a man you've known for 3 weeks who lives in a dirt cabin in the middle of nowhere." Father would be appalled.
Father would be appalled at you. Vernon's smile vanished. Watch your tongue. Or what? Ellie's voice rose. You'll hit me? Here? In front of the sheriff and the whole town? She pointed at Hartley, who had materialized across the street, with his hand resting on his holster. Go ahead, Vernon. Show them who you really are. Vernon's jaw worked. His composure was cracking, and underneath it was the face Ellie knew, the face she'd seen in her nightmares for 3 years, cold and furious and barely contained. That court order gives me authority over you, he said, low and dangerous. You are coming home. I am home. You are mentally incompetent. A judge has declared, a judge you bought with father's money, a judge who sat at your dinner table and drank your wine and signed whatever you put in front of him. Ellie's voice carried across the silent street. Every door was open. Every eye was watching. Tell them, Vernon. Tell them about Douglas Fairley. Tell them about the man you tried to sell me to so you could cover your gambling debts. Vernon's face went white. You lying... Tell them about the belt buckle, Ellie said, and her voice broke, but she kept going. Tell them about the fireplace poker. Tell them about the night you broke my ribs because I dropped a teacup. She's hysterical, Vernon said loudly, turning to the growing crowd. This is exactly what I've been... Show them your hands, Vernon. He froze. Show them your hands. The right one. The knuckles. Show them the scars from my teeth when I bit you trying to get away the night I left Philadelphia. Every person on the street looked at Vernon's hands. He shoved them in his pockets, but not before Caleb saw it. The right hand, scarred across the knuckles, fresh enough to still be pink. That's enough, Vernon hissed. Cobb. Silas Cobb straightened up from the hitching post and took one step forward. The click of a hammer being pulled back stopped him dead. Sheriff Hartley stood in the street, his revolver drawn and leveled at Cobb's chest. Mr. Cobb, Hartley said calmly, I strongly recommend you lean back against that post and stay there. Cobb measured the distance, measured the sheriff, made a calculation, and leaned back. This isn't over, Eleanor, Vernon said. His voice was shaking with rage. That court order is valid. I'll have the territorial judge here within a week, and when he rules in my favor, you'll come back to Philadelphia if I have to drag you. Ellie looked at her half-brother, the man who'd controlled her, beaten her, starved her, broken her bones and called it care. The man who'd stolen her inheritance, sold her body to pay his debts, and then told a judge she was crazy. She looked at him, and she was not afraid. No, Vernon, she said quietly. I won't. She turned her back on him and walked to the church door. Pastor Whitman stood inside, Bible in hand, looking nervous but resolute. Maggie was there, and Jim, and Ruth Calloway, who had closed her restaurant for the first time in 12 years. Doc Bridges sat in the back pew, stone-sober and grim-faced. Caleb was waiting at the altar. Ellie walked down the aisle of that small church, and with every step, she felt the weight of 3 years of terror lifting off her shoulders. Not gone, not yet, but lighter, so much lighter. She took Caleb's hand. His grip was warm and steady and sure. You all right? He whispered. I just told my brother to go to hell in front of the whole town. I noticed. I think I'm going to shake for about 3 hours. I'll hold you up. Pastor Whitman cleared his throat. Shall we begin? The ceremony was short. No music, no flowers, no grand declarations. Just 2 people standing in a beam of dusty sunlight, speaking vows they meant with every breath. When the pastor said, You may kiss the bride, Caleb looked at Ellie. Only if you... She kissed him. Quick, soft, fierce.
and when she pulled back, she was smiling through tears. "Mrs. Thornton?" he said. "Mr. Thornton," she replied. Ruth Calloway blew her nose loud enough to rattle the windows. Doc Bridges stood up and clapped once, hard. Maggie was crying openly and pretending she wasn't. They signed the paper, the marriage certificate that made it legal, binding, and beyond Vernon Prescott's reach. Hartley witnessed it, stamped it, and tucked a copy into his vest. "It's done," Hartley said. "He can waive that court order until his arm falls off. She's your wife. His guardianship is void." They walked out of the church together, husband and wife, into the bright morning light. The street was lined with people. Some nodded, some smiled. Martha Hadley pursed her lips, but said nothing. Vernon was gone. So was Cobb. "Where did they go?" Caleb asked Hartley. "Saloon. Prescott looked like a man who just lost a poker hand." Hartley paused. "But Caleb, a man like that doesn't fold easy. He'll try something else. Watch your back." "I will." Caleb helped Ellie onto the wagon. She was trembling, just like she'd predicted, the adrenaline burning off and leaving her shaky and pale. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "You were the bravest person I've ever seen back there," he said. "I was terrified." "That's what brave means." She leaned against him as the wagon rolled out of town. Her hand found his on the reins, and she held it all the way home. That night, Ellie didn't go to her room. She sat at the kitchen table with Caleb, drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, neither of them willing to break the silence that held them together. "He's not going to stop," she finally said. "No. He'll come for me. For us. He'll find a way." "Let him try." "Caleb, you don't know him like I do. He's patient. He's cruel. And he doesn't lose." "He's already lost," Caleb said. "He just hasn't figured it out yet." Ellie looked at the marriage certificate lying on the table between them, her name next to his. Legal. Permanent. Real. "I don't regret it," she said. "Neither do I. But I need you to know something." She met his eyes. "I didn't marry you because of Vernon. I married you because, when I was standing on those church steps, and I felt the fear trying to swallow me whole, the only thing that kept me moving forward was knowing you were waiting inside." Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. He didn't speak. Some things didn't need words. Ellie stood. She walked around the table, bent down, and kissed him. Not the quick, fierce kiss from the church. Slow. Deliberate. A choice made freely, without fear, without obligation, without a single shadow hanging over it. When she pulled back, she whispered, "Good night, husband." "Good night, wife." She went to her room. The bolt didn't slide. Caleb sat at the table for a long time, his hand still warm from hers, listening to the silence of a cabin that wasn't silent anymore. Outside, somewhere in Copper Bluff, a man with scarred knuckles was planning his next move. But inside this cabin, in this moment, there was only peace. And Caleb Thornton held onto it with everything he had. Because he knew it wouldn't last. 2 days passed without a word from Vernon Prescott. No rider on the trail. No message from town. Nothing but silence. And Caleb trusted that silence about as much as he trusted a rattlesnake lying still in the shade. He kept the Winchester by the front door and the shotgun by the back. He rode the perimeter of his property every morning before dawn and every evening before dark, Ellie noticed. She didn't say anything. She just started keeping the Colt in her apron pocket instead of the nightstand. On the third morning, Caleb came in from the barn to find Ellie standing at the kitchen table with a piece of paper in her hand. Her face was the color of ash. What is it? She held it out. Her hand was steady, but her voice wasn't. It was nailed to the chicken coop. Caleb took the paper. Block letters, written in charcoal. You belong to me. A piece of paper doesn't change that. I'll be seeing you soon, Eleanor. Caleb's vision went red at the edges. He was here, on our land. Last night, while we were sleeping. That means Cobb was here too. Caleb looked at her. Did you hear anything? Nothing. Caleb, he was 10 feet from our door and I didn't hear a thing. Her composure cracked. What if he'd come inside? What if... He didn't. But he could have. He won't. Not again. Caleb folded the note and shoved it in his pocket. Get dressed. We're going to town. They rode hard. Caleb's jaw was set so tight, Ellie could see the muscles working under his skin. She held onto the saddle and didn't speak. She knew this fury. She'd grown up around it. But Caleb's anger was different from Vernon's. Vernon's rage was a weapon he used against the weak. Caleb's was a wall he built around the people he loved. She realized, somewhere on that hard ride, that she'd just thought the word loved, and she hadn't flinched. Hartley was at his desk when Caleb slammed the note down in front of him. The sheriff read it twice, then looked up. When? Last night. Nailed to the chicken coop, 50 feet from our bedroom. Son of a... Hartley stood. That's trespassing at minimum. Intimidation. Could argue threat of bodily harm. I don't want to argue anything, Wade. I want him gone. So do I, but I need evidence that connects this to Prescott. Block letters don't prove who wrote it. Who else would it be? You know who it is. I know who it is, but knowing and proving are two different animals. Hartley grabbed his hat. I'll go talk to him. Put the fear of God in him. But Caleb, unless I catch him in the act, or he does something I can arrest him for, my hands are tied. Then untie them. That's not how law works, and you know it. Caleb planted both hands on the desk. That man was on my property in the middle of the night. My wife was sleeping 30 feet away. If he comes back and sets foot on your land, you're within your rights to defend your home. Montana Territory's clear on that. Hartley held his gaze. But you shoot first, and he turns out to be unarmed. It's you standing trial. Understand? I understand. Ellie. Hartley looked past Caleb. You all right? Ellie stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face unreadable. I've been getting notes like that for 3 years, Sheriff. The only difference is, this one wasn't slipped under my bedroom door. He used to leave them in your room? Under my pillow, in my shoes, pinned to my clothes. She said it flatly, the way she always reported Vernon's cruelties, like reading a list of someone else's miseries. He liked me to know he could reach me any time he wanted, that nowhere was safe. Hartley's face darkened. I'm going to the saloon. You two stay here. He left. Caleb turned to Ellie. Why didn't you tell me about the notes? Because it didn't matter. It matters. It's what Vernon does, Caleb. He doesn't attack head-on. He wears you down. Little threats, little reminders. He wants me to know he's patient, that he can wait. She uncrossed her arms. He's trying to make me run. Will you? She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. I just married you 3 days ago. I'm not running anywhere. Good, because neither am I. Ruth Calloway appeared at the sheriff's office 20 minutes later, having heard the news through the invisible telegraph that connected every woman in Copper Bluff. She brought biscuits, coffee, and fury. That snake left a note on your property? Ruth set the basket down hard enough to rattle the desk. In the middle of the night? Ruth, it's being handled. Handled? By who? Wade Hartley, who can't arrest a man for writing a note? No offense to Wade, but the law moves slower than molasses in January when it comes to protecting women. Ruth turned to Ellie. What do you need, child? I need my brother to disappear. Can't help with that. What else? Ellie almost smiled. I need people to know the truth about him. Not just what I said on the church steps. All of it. Every bruise, every scar, every lie he told that judge. If this goes before a territorial court, Vernon will show up in his fine suit with his fine manners and convince everyone I'm the one who's broken.
Ruth sat down. Then we make sure he can't.
How?
Doc Bridges examined you. He's got a medical record of every injury. That's evidence. Ruth counted on her fingers. The letter from the bride agency. That's a witness statement. Every person in this town saw your face the day you stepped off that coach. That's a whole street full of witnesses. Against a court order signed by a Philadelphia judge. Honey, this ain't Philadelphia. This is Montana. And in Montana, people look at the person standing in front of them, not the paper in somebody's hand. Hartley came back an hour later. His expression told Caleb everything he needed to know. He's gone. What do you mean, gone? Prescott and Cobb checked out of the boarding house this morning. Horses are gone. Landlady said they left before dawn. Ellie went rigid. He didn't leave. His things are gone, Ellie. He didn't leave, she repeated. Vernon doesn't quit. He repositions. He's still here somewhere, or he's coming back with something worse. Hartley looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Ellie. He knew, in his bones, that she was right. 3 years under Vernon's control had made her an expert in his patterns, and her instincts were sharper than any lawman's. What would he do next? Caleb asked. If you had to guess. Ellie thought for a long time. He'd find leverage. Something he could use against you, not me. Vernon knows I won't break anymore, so he'll try to break the people around me instead. She looked at Caleb. He'll go after your reputation, your property, your livelihood. Anything to make it too costly for you to keep me. Nothing's too costly. You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow, too. 4 days of quiet followed. Caleb and Ellie worked the ranch. They ate together, talked together, and each night Ellie's door stayed unbolted. She hadn't moved into his room. They weren't there yet, and Caleb didn't push. But the open door was its own language. On the 5th day, trouble arrived, wearing a badge. A man rode up to the ranch at mid-morning. He was lean, sharp-faced, and wore a U.S. Marshal's star on his vest. Behind him rode 2 deputies. Caleb met them in the yard, his hand resting casually near his hip. Help you? Caleb Thornton? That's right. The marshal produced a document. My name is Marshal Henry Dolan, out of Helena. I've got a court order from Territorial Judge Morrison directing me to take custody of one Eleanor Prescott and return her to the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, pending a competency hearing. The ground dropped out from under Caleb's feet. She's Eleanor Thornton now. We're married. Dolan looked at the document. The order was filed before your marriage and names Eleanor Prescott. The petitioner argues the marriage was conducted under duress and is therefore invalid. Under duress? She chose to marry me. That's for a judge to decide, Mr. Thornton. I'm here to execute the order, not interpret it. Ellie came out of the cabin. She saw the badges. She saw the document. And something in her face went completely still. No, she said. Dolan tipped his hat. Ma'am, I'm sorry about this, but I've got a legal obligation. I said no. Ellie stepped off the porch. I'm not going back. I'm a married woman standing on my own property. You have no authority here. Ma'am, this order comes from Territorial Judge Morrison, who was contacted by Vernon Prescott, Ellie said.
A man currently wanted for trespassing and criminal intimidation in this county. Did your judge mention that?"
Dolan hesitated. "The petition didn't mention—"
"Of course it didn't."
Ellie's voice shook with rage, not fear.
"Because Vernon Press liar, Marshall.
He beat me for 3 years. He broke my ribs. He tried to sell me to a man 3 times my age to pay his gambling debts. And when I ran, he bought a judge to call me crazy so he could drag me back." "Ma'am, I sympathize, but—"
"Don't sympathize. Listen."
She rolled up her sleeves, both arms. The scars caught the light.
"These are from a belt buckle. This one is from a fireplace poker. This one is from a letter opener. Do these look self-inflicted to you, Marshall?"
Dolan stared at her arms. His jaw worked.
"I have a doctor's report," Ellie continued. "I have witnesses. I have a letter from the agency that helped me escape. And I have a husband who has never once raised his hand to me."
She pointed at the document.
"That paper was bought with blood money by a man who tortured me. And if you take me back to him, you are delivering me to my death."
The silence stretched taut as wire. One of the deputies shifted uncomfortably. "Marshall, maybe we should—"
"Quiet."
Dolan looked at the document again, then at Ellie, then at Caleb. "Mr. Thornton, do you have proof of marriage?" "Signed certificate, witnessed by Sheriff Hartley and Pastor Whitman." "And this doctor's report she mentioned?" "Dr. Samuel Bridges, 22 years practicing in Copper Bluff. I can have him here within the hour." Dolan folded the document slowly. "I'm going to do something I've never done in 20 years of carrying this badge. I'm going to delay execution of this order pending verification. That means I need to see the marriage certificate, the medical report, and I need to speak with your sheriff. If everything checks out, I'll recommend to Judge Morrison that the order be stayed, pending a full hearing." "And if it doesn't check out?" Caleb asked. "Then I'll be back, and I won't be asking." Dolan mounted his horse. "You've got 24 hours, Thornton. Have your evidence ready." They watched the riders disappear down the trail. Ellie stood in the yard, her sleeves still rolled up, her scars exposed to the sunlight. She was trembling from head to foot. Caleb reached for her. She grabbed onto him and held on so hard he could feel her heartbeat against his chest.
24 hours, she whispered. "That's all we need."
Caleb rode to town like the devil was chasing him. He hit Hartley's office first, then Doc Bridges, then Ruth's restaurant. By nightfall, he had assembled everything they needed at the sheriff's office. The marriage certificate, signed and stamped. Doc Bridges' medical report, 3 pages detailing every injury, the broken ribs, the displaced 4th rib, the badly healed wrist, the systematic scarring on both forearms, the malnutrition, the bruising patterns consistent with sustained physical abuse. The letter from the Western Bride Protective Agency. A signed statement from Ruth Calloway describing Ellie's condition the day she arrived, and a written account from Frank Delaney, the stage line operator, confirming Ellie's visible injuries when she stepped off the coach. But it was Maggie who delivered the killing blow. She arrived at the sheriff's office just before sunset, dusty and out of breath, carrying a leather satchel. "What's that?" Caleb asked. "Something that changes everything." Maggie opened the satchel and pulled out a stack of letters tied with string. "After you told me about Vernon, I wrote to a friend of mine in Philadelphia, Helen Gardner. Her husband's a lawyer. I asked her to look into Vernon Prescott." "Maggie, hush." Helen wrote back yesterday, express post. Maggie untied the letters. "Vernon Prescott has been sued 3 times in the past 2 years, twice for unpaid gambling debts, once by a woman named Clara Tillman." "Who's Clara Tillman?" "His former housekeeper.
She filed a complaint with the Philadelphia police, alleging that Vernon Prescott assaulted her in his home. The complaint was withdrawn after Vernon's lawyer threatened her. But Helen tracked her down. Maggie pulled out a single sheet of paper. Clara Tillman's sworn statement, describing how Vernon Prescott beat her with a belt when she tried to stop him from hitting Ellie. The room went dead silent. "There's a witness," Caleb said. "There's a witness. A witness who saw him beat Ellie and who was beaten herself for trying to intervene. And she's willing to testify." Hartley took the statement and read it carefully. When he looked up, his eyes were hard as flint. "This is enough. Combined with Doc's report and the agency letter, this is more than enough." "For what?" Caleb asked. "To file a counter-petition. Not just to block Vernon's order, but to have him charged. Assault, false imprisonment, fraud. That competency order was obtained under false pretenses." Hartley looked at each of them. "Vernon Prescott isn't just going to lose his claim on Ellie. If this goes the way I think it will, he's going to prison." The next morning, Marshal Dolan arrived at the sheriff's office to find every piece of evidence laid out on Hartley's desk like a battlefield map. He spent 2 hours reading every document, asking questions, cross-referencing dates. When he finished, he sat back in his chair and rubbed his face. "I've been a marshal for 20 years, he said. "I've executed a lot of orders I didn't agree with because the law said I had to. But this," he tapped the stack of papers, "this isn't law. This is a wealthy man using the legal system as a weapon against a woman he abused." "So what happens now?" Caleb asked. "I'm going to ride back to Helena and recommend that Judge Morrison vacate the custody order immediately. I'm going to include Doc Bridges' medical report, the Tillman statement, and the agency letter, and I'm going to recommend that the matter be referred to federal authorities for investigation into the fraudulent competency filing." "And Vernon?" "If he's smart, he'll be on the next train back to Philadelphia. If he's stupid," Dolan shrugged, "well, I've got 2 deputies, and Sheriff Hartley's got a jail cell." "He's not smart," Ellie said from the doorway. "He's proud. Proud men don't run." Dolan looked at her for a long moment. "Mrs. Thornton, you are one of the bravest women I've ever met." "I'm not brave, Marshal. I'm just done being afraid." Dolan left for Helena that afternoon. The town held its breath. Caleb and Ellie went home and tried to live normally. But normal was a word that had lost all meaning. 2 days later, Vernon made his move. It was early evening. Caleb was in the barn feeding the horses. Ellie was inside, kneading dough for bread. She heard the back door creak and assumed it was the wind. Then she smelled cologne. Expensive cologne, the kind Vernon wore. She turned slowly. He stood in her kitchen, 3 feet away. Silas Cobb blocked the back door behind him. Cobb held a rope. "Hello, Eleanor," Vernon said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, the voice he used before the worst of it. "It's time to come home." Ellie's hand moved to her apron pocket. The Colt was there, loaded, ready. Her fingers closed around the grip. "You're in my home, Vernon." "This isn't a home. This is a shack in the wilderness. And that man out there isn't your husband. He's a stranger who answered your desperation." Vernon took a step closer. "I've been patient, Eleanor. I've tried to do this the legal way. But you've forced my hand." "I forced nothing. You came 2,000 miles to drag back a woman who would rather die than live under your roof." "Such drama." Vernon shook his head. "You always were theatrical. Cobb, take her." Cobb moved forward. Ellie pulled the Colt from her apron and leveled it at his chest. Cobb stopped dead. "One more step," Ellie said, "and I'll put a bullet through your heart." Cobb looked at Vernon. Vernon's composure finally, truly, shattered. "You wouldn't dare." 3 years, Vernon. 3 years of your belt and your fists and your poker and your sick, twisted games. 3 years of being told I was worthless, that I was crazy, that no one would ever believe. Ellie cocked the hammer. "I dare." "She's bluffing," Vernon said to Cobb. "She doesn't have it in her." "I bit through your hand to escape you," Ellie said quietly. "You think I won't pull a trigger?" The back door crashed open, but it wasn't Cobb who came through. It was Caleb. He'd come around from the barn when he heard voices. He stood in the doorway behind Cobb, his Winchester leveled at the back of the hired man's skull. "Don't move," Caleb said. His voice was ice. "Either of you." Cobb raised his hands slowly. Vernon looked between Caleb's rifle and Ellie's pistol, and for the first time since he'd arrived in Montana, real fear crossed his face. "Ellie," Caleb said, not taking his eyes off Cobb. "You all right?" "I'm all right." "You can put the gun down now." "Not yet." Caleb didn't argue. "Here's what's going to happen," Caleb said. "Cobb, you're going to unbuckle your gun belt and drop it. Then you're going to walk out the front door and sit on the porch with your hands on your head. If you reach for anything, my wife will shoot you in the chest, and I'll shoot you in the back. And no jury in Montana will convict either of us." Cobb unbuckled his belt. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. He walked to the front door and went outside. Vernon stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by flour dust and bread dough, facing his sister and the man she'd married. No hired gun, no judge's order, no money, no power, no leverage. Just a man in a fine suit with scarred knuckles and nothing left. "Sit down, Vernon," Ellie said. "Eleanor, sit down." He sat. His hands gripped the edge of the table. His knuckles were white. Ellie kept the Colt trained on him. "You're going to listen to me now. For the first time in your miserable life, you're going to listen." "I don't." "I'm talking." Her voice cut like a blade. "You took everything Father left me. You took my inheritance, my home, my freedom. You beat me until I couldn't stand, then told the world I was crazy. You tried to sell me to a man who wanted to own me the way you owned me." "I never owned." "You broke my ribs over a teacup, Vernon." Tears ran down her face, but her aim didn't waver. "A teacup, your mother's teacup, which I washed and dried and cared for every day because it was the only beautiful thing left in that house. And when it slipped, when it broke, you broke me with it." Vernon's mouth opened and closed. No words came. "But I survived. I survived you. I walked out of that house with 2 broken ribs and blood on my dress. And I got on a train, and I rode 2,000 miles to the end of the earth. And I found a man who gave me a locked door and a loaded gun and never once asked me to be less than what I am." She lowered the Colt 1 inch. "You've lost, Vernon. The marshal has the evidence. Clara Tillman is willing to testify. Doc Bridges has documented everything you did to me. It's over." Vernon's face had gone gray. "Clara talked?" Clara talked. Something collapsed behind his eyes. The calculation, the control, the cruel intelligence. All of it crumbled at once, and what was left was a small, pathetic man sitting in a stranger's kitchen with flour on his expensive suit. "If you go back to Philadelphia quietly," Ellie said, "I won't press charges. You'll lose the guardianship. You'll lose control of Father's estate. But you'll be free. And if I don't? Then Marshal Dolan will arrest you for assault, false imprisonment, and fraud. And you'll spend the next 10 years explaining to a prison warden
Why you beat your sister with a fireplace poker. The silence lasted a full minute. You used to be such a quiet girl, Vernon whispered. You taught me to fight, Ellie said. I suppose I should thank you for that. Vernon stood slowly. He looked at Caleb, who still held the Winchester. He looked at Ellie, who still held the Colt. He looked around the small, flour-dusted kitchen of a Montana ranch cabin, and something final passed across his face. You'll never be free of me, Eleanor, he said. Not really. I'll always be in your head. Maybe, Ellie said. But you'll never be in my house again. Caleb stepped aside. Vernon walked through the back door, collected Cobb from the porch, and mounted his horse. He rode out of the yard without looking back. Ellie stood at the kitchen table, the Colt still in her hand, until the sound of hooves faded to nothing. Then her knees buckled. Caleb caught her. He took the gun gently from her hand, set it on the table, and held her while she shook. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She just trembled, her whole body releasing 3 years of terror in violent, silent waves. It's over, Caleb said. Ellie, it's over. I know, she whispered. I know it's over. That's why I can't stop shaking. He held her until the trembling stopped. Then he made her tea, sat across from her at the flower-covered table, and waited for her to be ready to speak. I almost shot him, she said finally. I know. Part of me wanted to. I know that, too. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you a person who survived something terrible and had the strength to end it without pulling the trigger. That doesn't make you bad, Ellie. That makes you better than he ever deserved. She looked at the Colt lying on the table. He said I'd never be free of him. He's wrong. Is he? Caleb reached across and took her hand. 3 weeks ago you couldn't sleep without a bolted door. 2 weeks ago you unlocked it. A week ago you married me. Today you looked him in the eye and told him it was over. He squeezed her hand. That sound like a woman who ain't free? Ellie closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had changed. The last shadow, the one that had lived behind her eyes since the day she'd arrived, had finally lifted. No, she said softly. It doesn't. That night, for the first time, Ellie didn't go to her room. She took Caleb's hand, led him to the porch, and they sat together watching the stars fill the Montana sky. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her. Neither spoke for a long time. Caleb? Yeah? I think I'd like to move my things into your room, if that's all right. His arm tightened around her. That's more than all right. And Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for not killing him. Thank you for not letting me. She laughed then, a real laugh, full and warm, rising into the night air like smoke from a fire that had finally caught. And Caleb Thornton laughed with her, because for the first time in 6 years, the future felt like something to walk toward, instead of something to survive. The letter from Marshal Dolan arrived on a Monday. Caleb was mending the corral fence when Ellie came out of the cabin holding the envelope. Her hands were steady, but her face carried that particular stillness he'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she was bracing for impact. It's from Helena, she said. Caleb set down the hammer. Open it. I can't. My fingers won't work. She held it out. You do it. He took the envelope, tore it open, and read aloud. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, it is my duty to inform you that Territorial Judge William Morrison has reviewed the evidence submitted in the matter of Vernon Prescott versus Eleanor Prescott Thornton. Based on the medical testimony of Dr. Samuel Bridges, the sworn statement of Clara Tillman, the official record of the Western Bride Protective Agency, and the corroborating witness accounts from the citizens of Copper Bluff,
Judge Morrison has ruled as follows. 1. The competency order filed by Vernon Prescott is hereby vacated in its entirety. 2. The guardianship claim is permanently dissolved. 3. The marriage of Caleb Thornton and Eleanor Prescott Thornton is recognized as legal and binding. 4. A warrant has been issued for the arrest of Vernon Prescott on charges of assault, false imprisonment, and fraudulent use of the court system. Caleb looked up. Ellie hadn't moved. "There's more," he said. "Furthermore, upon review of the late Richard Prescott's estate documents, it has been determined that Eleanor Prescott Thornton is entitled to her full share of the family estate, which was unlawfully withheld by her guardian. A legal representative will be appointed to pursue the restoration of said assets." Ellie sat down on the porch step, not because her legs gave out, but slowly, deliberately, like a woman setting down a weight she'd carried for so long, she'd forgotten what standing without it felt like. "It's over," she said. "It's over. He can't touch me. He can never touch you again." She pressed both hands flat on the wooden step, feeling the grain under her palms. "I keep waiting to feel something. Relief, joy, something. But all I feel is—" She searched for the word. "Quiet. Like the noise in my head finally stopped." Caleb sat beside her. "Maybe that's what relief feels like when you've been scared long enough. Not fireworks, just quiet." "Is that how it was for you, after Sarah?" "No, after Sarah, it was just empty. This is different." He looked at her. "This is full." She leaned into him. He put his arm around her. They sat on the porch step in the morning sun. Two people who had each carried their grief alone for years, finally resting in the same silence. Ruth Calloway threw a party. She didn't ask permission, didn't consult anyone, just showed up at the ranch 3 days later in a wagon loaded with food, followed by Maggie and Jim, Doc Bridges, Sheriff Hartley, Pastor Whitman, and half the town. "What is this?" Caleb said, standing in the yard looking bewildered. "Your wedding reception," Ruth announced, climbing down from the wagon with a ham the size of a small child. "Since you two got married in such a rush that nobody got to celebrate properly." "Ruth, we don't need—" "Caleb Thornton, you spent 6 years hiding in this cabin like a hermit. Your wife faced down her demon on the steps of our church, and then held a gun on him in her own kitchen. We are celebrating whether you like it or not. Now move out of my way. I've got potato salad that won't keep." Ellie appeared in the doorway. She looked at the wagons, the people, the food being unloaded, and her eyes went wide. "What's happening?" "Apparently we're having a party," Caleb said. I've never had—" She stopped. "I don't know how to do this." Maggie was already beside her. "You don't have to do anything. Just stand there, eat food, and let people be nice to you. Think you can manage that?" "I can try. That's my girl." The party spilled across the yard and into the cabin. Ruth took over the kitchen. Maggie organized everything and everyone. Jim played a fiddle he'd brought, and it turned out Doc Bridges could sing when he wasn't drinking, which was rare, but happening today because Ruth had hidden every bottle within a mile radius. People came up to Ellie one by one, not with grand speeches or dramatic gestures, with small things. Martha Hadley, the preacher's wife who had been so sharp at the general store, brought a quilt she'd sewn. She handed it to Ellie without quite meeting her eyes. "For your bed," Martha said stiffly. "It gets cold up here in winter." "Thank you, Mrs. Hadley." Martha hesitated. "I said some unkind things when you first arrived. I was wrong. I wanted you to know that." "It takes courage to say that." "It takes more courage to do what you did." Martha nodded once and walked away quickly, but Ellie saw her wipe her eyes before she reached the food table. Frank Delaney brought a rocking chair he'd made himself. "Every porch needs one," he said, setting it down. "And I reckon you've earned a place to sit." Jenkins from the general store brought a bolt of fabric, fine blue cotton, the kind Ellie had admired but never mentioned she couldn't afford. "For your shop," he said, and when Ellie looked confused, he grinned. "Ruth told me you sew. She said you'd be opening a dress shop in town before the year's out. I'm getting ahead of the rush." Ellie looked at Ruth across the yard. Ruth shrugged. "I may have mentioned it to a few people. I never said I was opening a shop." "You will, though, won't you?" Ellie held the fabric in her hands. She'd made her own clothes since she was 12. She'd mended Vernon's shirts, altered his suits, repaired his curtains. Sewing had been labor, obligation, survival. The idea that it could be something else, something chosen, something hers, hadn't occurred to her until this moment. "Maybe I will," she said. "Definitely you will," Ruth corrected. "And I'll be your first customer. I've been wearing the same 3 dresses since the Grant administration." As the afternoon wore on, Ellie found herself standing at the edge of the yard, watching. Caleb was talking with Jim and Hartley, laughing about something, his face open and easy in a way she'd never seen before. Maggie was bossing Doc Bridges around the food table. Ruth held court by the porch, telling stories that made the men blush and the women howl. These people had closed ranks around her. A stranger, a battered woman who'd arrived on a stagecoach with a bruised face and a letter begging someone to keep her safe. They'd fed her, doctored her, witnessed her marriage, confronted her abuser. And now they were celebrating her freedom on a summer afternoon like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ellie Prescott had spent 24 years believing she was alone, that the world was divided into people who hurt you and people who watched. She'd been wrong. "You're crying," Maggie said, appearing beside her. "I'm not crying. Honey, there are tears running down your face. It's the sun. It's the happiness. You're just not used to it yet." Maggie put her arm around Ellie's shoulders. "Give it time. You'll learn." That evening, after the last wagon had rolled away and the yard was empty, Caleb found Ellie sitting in the new rocking chair on the porch. She had the blue fabric in her lap, running her fingers over it absently. "Good day?" he asked. "The best day of my life." She said it simply, without drama, like stating the weather. "I didn't know days could be like that." "Like what?" "Full of people who actually want you there." Caleb sat on the step below her. "Get used to it." "Ruth said the same thing." Ellie paused. "Caleb, I want to open that shop. The dress shop. Ruth wasn't wrong." "I know she wasn't." "It would mean riding into town regularly, being around people, being visible." "Is that what you want?" "It's what I need. I spent 3 years being hidden, kept in a house, kept from people, kept small so Vernon could feel big. I don't want to be kept anymore, not even by safety." "Then we'll do it." "Just like that?" "Just like that. We'll find you a space. Jenkins has that empty room next to the general store. It's small, but it's got good light and a street-facing window." Ellie stared at him. "You've already thought about this." "Ruth may have mentioned it to me, too," he smiled. "About 6 times. That woman is a force of nature. That woman is the reason half this town functions at all. And she picked you, Ellie. That means something around here." 2 weeks later, Ellie opened Thornton Dressmaking in the small room beside Jenkins' general store. She started with alterations and mending, simple work that let the women of Copper Bluff come through the door without needing a reason. But they came, and they stayed, and they talked. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, the way trust builds in a small town. One hemline, one button, one careful conversation at a time. Martha Hadley was her second customer. She brought in a dress she'd worn to her daughter's wedding 15 years ago and asked Ellie to take it in. "I've gained weight since then," Martha said. "Everyone has." "You haven't gained weight, Mrs. Hadley. The dress was cut too narrow in the first place. Whoever made this didn't account for a woman who actually breathes." Martha let out a startled laugh. "Well, I never thought of it that way." "Most dressmakers don't. They make clothes for mannequins, not people." Ellie pinned the fabric with quick, sure hands. "I make clothes for people." Word spread. Within a month, Ellie had more work than she could handle. She hired a girl from town, Sally McKinnon, 16, shy, with clever fingers and a mother who drank, and taught her to sew seams and press fabric. "You're good at this," Caleb said one evening, watching her sketch a dress design by lamplight. "Teaching, I mean." "I'm just showing her what my mother showed me." "Your mother would be proud." Ellie's pencil stopped. "I think about her sometimes. What she'd say if she could see me now. A rancher's wife in Montana with a dress shop and a husband who can't cook." "I can cook." "You burned water last Tuesday. That pot was defective." "The pot was fine. You forgot it was on the stove for 40 minutes. "I was fixing the fence." "You were talking to the horse." "The horse was having a bad day." Ellie laughed. She laughed easily now, freely, the sound filling whatever room she was in. Caleb collected those laughs like a man counting gold coins, each one more valuable than the last. The summer deepened. The garden exploded with life under Ellie's hands. She grew tomatoes, beans, squash, and herbs she used for medicines she'd learned from her mother. Women started coming to the ranch for remedies: chamomile tea for sleeplessness, willow bark for headaches, lavender sachets for the cradle. "You're becoming the town healer," Caleb said. "I'm becoming useful." "There's a difference. You were always useful. Not to Vernon. Vernon's opinion doesn't count anymore." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." In late August, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. Not from Vernon, from Clara Tillman. Ellie read it aloud at the kitchen table, her voice steady. "Dear Miss Eleanor, I hope this letter finds you well and safe. I wanted you to know that Vernon was arrested in Philadelphia 3 weeks ago. He was charged with assault, fraud, and misuse of the courts. His lawyer tried to arrange bail, but the judge, a different judge, not Whitfield, denied it based on the evidence from Montana and my statement. Whitfield himself is under investigation. Vernon's trial is set for October. I have been asked to testify, and I will. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I was afraid. I know you understand what that means. You were braver than all of us. I wish you every happiness. Clara." Ellie folded the letter. She sat with it for a long time. "Are you all right?" Caleb asked. "Clara was the only person in that house who ever tried to help me. Vernon caught her trying to clean my wounds one night after he'd—" Ellie stopped. "He beat her, too. She was 58 years old, and he beat her with a broom handle because she'd put a cold cloth on my forehead." "She's brave, writing that letter." "She's brave for testifying. Writing a letter is easy. Walking into a courtroom and telling the truth about a powerful man, that's something else entirely." "You did it, on the church steps, in front of the whole town." "That was different. I was backed into a corner. Clara's choosing the step forward when she could stay silent. That's harder." Caleb reached across and took her hand. "You want to write back?" "I want to do more than write back. I want to write to the agency. Mrs. Whitmore, who helped me escape. I want to tell her what happened here, how it ended, because somewhere right now, there's another woman in another city being told she's crazy, being told she deserves it, being told there's no way out. Ellie gripped his hand. I want her to know there is. Then write it. Ellie wrote the letter that night. It took her 3 hours and 7 drafts. She wrote about Vernon, about the escape, about arriving in Montana with blood on her face. She wrote about Caleb and the locked door and the loaded gun, about Ruth and Maggie and Doc Bridges and the people of Copper Bluff who had circled around a stranger and said, "You belong here." She wrote about the confrontation on the church steps, and the night Vernon came to the cabin, and the moment she'd held a gun on her own brother and chose not to pull the trigger. And she wrote about the dress shop, about Sally McKinnon learning to sew, about Martha Hadley's laugh, about the rocking chair on the porch, and the garden that grew wild, and the husband who talked to horses, and burned water, and made her feel, for the first time in her adult life, like a person instead of a possession. She sealed the letter and addressed it to Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, Western Bride Protective Agency, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's done, she told Caleb. Will you post it tomorrow? First thing. Thank you. She looked at the sealed envelope. Do you think it'll matter? One letter? One letter brought you here, Caleb said. One letter changed both our lives. Don't underestimate what a letter can do. September arrived with cooler nights and a sky so clear the stars looked close enough to grab. Ellie had been in Montana for 3 months. 3 months since the stagecoach. 3 months since the bruise and the letter and the man who'd said, "You're not alone now." On a Thursday morning, she woke early, slipped out of bed, their bed now, the one they shared, and sat on the porch with her coffee. The air smelled like sage and coming autumn. She could hear Caleb in the barn, talking to the horses the way he did every morning, his low voice carrying across the yard. She put her hand on her stomach. She'd been counting days for 2 weeks now, telling herself it was stress, or the change of climate, or the upheaval of everything. But she knew. Her body knew. When Caleb came in for breakfast, she was standing at the stove with her back to him, scrambling eggs. Her hands were shaking. "Morning," he said, pouring coffee. "Caleb." "Yeah?" "Sit down." He sat, his face instantly alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She turned to him. Caleb, I think I'm carrying." He went very still. Carrying. A baby. I think I'm going to have a baby. The coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, deliberately, like a man trying not to spill something precious. "You're sure?" "I'm late. 5 weeks late. And I've been sick in the mornings. And I just know. The way my mother said she knew." Caleb stood up. His chair scraped back against the floor. He walked around the table, stopped in front of her, and put his hands on her shoulders. "A baby," he said. "Are you happy?" "Happy." He repeated the word like he was learning a new language. "Ellie, His voice broke. Caleb Thornton, who had faced down Vernon Prescott without flinching, who had held a rifle steady while a hired gun blocked his door, who had buried his first wife without shedding a tear in public. His voice broke over the word, happy. "I'll take that as a yes," she whispered. He pulled her against him, careful, gentle, one hand on her back and the other cradling the back of her head. She felt his chest heave once, twice, and realized he was crying. "I never thought I'd get this," he said into her hair. "Any of this. I'd given up, Ellie. I was living like a dead man in a cabin, waiting for the years to pass. And then you showed up, with blood on your face and a knife in your sleeve, and turned everything inside out." "You're welcome," she said, and he laughed through his tears, and she laughed too, and they stood in the kitchen, holding each other, while the eggs burned on the stove, and neither one of them cared. Doc Bridges confirmed it a week later. "Healthy," he pronounced, closing his bag. "Strong heartbeat. You're about 7 weeks along, I'd say. Baby'll come late spring." "Spring," Ellie repeated. "I arrived here in spring." "Fitting then. New beginnings and all that." Doc looked at Caleb. "You're going to want to add a room onto that cabin." "Already planning it." "And you're going to want to stop letting her lift anything heavier than a coffee pot." "Already tried. She told me to mind my own business." "That sounds right," Doc smiled at Ellie. "You've got your mother's constitution, from what you've told me. That's a good thing. Montana winters are hard on expectant mothers. You eat well, rest when you can, and let that stubborn husband of yours do the heavy work." "I'll try." "You'll do." Doc shook Caleb's hand at the door. "Congratulations, Thornton. You're going to be a father." Caleb stood on the porch after Doc left, looking out over the valley. Ellie came up beside him and slipped her hand into his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking about the ad I placed. Seeking honest, hard-working woman willing to build a life in Montana territory. Not looking for love, looking for a partner." "I remember. I read it 100 times before I answered." "I meant every word. I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for someone to fill the silence." He turned to her. "I got so much more than I bargained for." "So did I. I was looking for an escape. I would have married anyone who offered safety. But I didn't marry anyone. I married you." "Lucky me." "Lucky us." The news spread through Copper Bluff the way all news did. Fast, thoroughly, and with Ruth Calloway serving as primary distributor. Within a week, the cabin had received a hand-carved cradle from Jim Blake, a stack of baby clothes from Martha Hadley's attic, and a standing offer from Ruth to move into the spare room for the last month of pregnancy. "She doesn't need to move in," Caleb protested. "She's having a baby 8 miles from the nearest town, in the middle of Montana winter," Ruth said flatly. "Yes, she does." "I grew up on a farm, Ruth. Women had babies without—" "And some of them died, Caleb. Don't argue with me on this." He didn't argue. He'd learned. Maggie took the news with her characteristic blend of emotion and efficiency. She cried for exactly 30 seconds, hugged Ellie hard enough to crack a rib, then produced a list of everything they'd need before the baby arrived. "We've got 6 months," she said. "That's enough time to add the room, stock up on supplies, and teach Caleb how to boil water without burning it." "I can boil water." "Caleb, you burned eggs this morning." "That was— The stove was fine. You were talking to the horse again." Autumn came with gold and amber and the sharp smell of wood smoke. Ellie kept the dress shop open 4 days a week, riding into town with Caleb in the morning and back in the evening. Sally McKinnon proved herself indispensable, managing the shop on Ellie's off days with quiet competence. One afternoon, a woman Ellie didn't recognize walked into the shop. She was young, maybe 20, with a fading bruise on her jawline and eyes that wouldn't stay still. "Can I help you?" Ellie asked. The woman looked at the door, then back at Ellie. "Mrs. Whitmore sent me, from the agency. She said you'd understand." Ellie set down her sewing. She looked at the bruise, the nervous eyes, the way the woman stood with her weight shifted, ready to run. She understood. "What's your name?" "Hannah. Hannah Marsh." "Are you hungry, Hannah?" The woman's chin trembled. "Yes, ma'am." Ellie took off her apron and hung it on the hook. She walked to the door, flipped the sign to closed, and guided Hannah to the chair by the window. "Ruth Calloway runs the restaurant across the street. She makes the best stew in Montana. I'm going to take you there, and you're going to eat, and then we're going to talk. All right?" Hannah's eyes filled. "Mrs. Whitmore said you were kind." Mrs. Whitmore was right. But more important than kind, I'm someone who's been exactly where you are right now. And I'm going to help you, Hannah, the same way people helped me." She took Hannah's hand and led her across the street to Ruth's restaurant. Ruth took one look at the bruise, one look at Ellie's face, and had a bowl of stew on the table before they sat down. That evening, Caleb found Ellie on the porch, rocking in the chair Frank Delaney had made. Her hand rested on her belly, which was just beginning to round. "Ruth told me about the girl," he said. "Hannah. She's 20. Husband beat her. She ran. Where is she now?" "Ruth's spare room. She'll stay there until we figure out something permanent." "We?" Ellie looked at him. "We. Ruth, Maggie, me, Doc Bridges, Hartley, the same people who helped me." She paused. "Caleb, I want to do this. Not just for Hannah, for every woman who comes after her. Mrs. Whitmore's agency helps them leave, but they need somewhere to go. Somewhere safe. You're talking about making Copper Bluff a destination, a place where women can start over. I'm talking about doing what was done for me, passing it forward." Caleb rocked his chair. "It'll bring trouble. Men like Vernon, they follow. And men like you stop them. I'm one man." "You're one man who taught me to shoot, gave me a locked door, and stood between me and my brother with a brother. One man is enough if he's the right one." She reached for his hand. "And you're not alone either. There's Hartley and Jim and Doc, and every person in this town who showed up at our ranch with food and furniture and quilts because they decided we were worth protecting." Caleb was quiet for a long time. The rocking chairs creaked in rhythm. "All right," he said. "We'll do it." "Yeah?" "Yeah. But we're going to need a bigger table." Ellie laughed. "We're going to need a bigger everything." Winter came hard to Montana that year, locking the valley under deep snow and silence. But inside the Thornton cabin, expanded now by one room and a reinforced roof, the silence was full of conversation, full of planning, full of the quiet sounds of two people building something bigger than themselves. Ellie's belly grew round. The baby kicked strong, and Caleb spent his evenings with his hand pressed to her stomach, feeling the flutter of new life against his palm. "Boy or girl?" he asked one night. "I don't care, as long as they're healthy and stubborn." "With us as parents, stubborn is guaranteed." "And loved. That's the part that matters. Loved from the first breath." "From before the first breath," Caleb said, and kissed her belly. And Ellie ran her fingers through his hair and felt, with absolute certainty, that the woman who had crawled off a stagecoach 5 months ago no longer existed. Not because she'd been erased, because she'd been rebuilt. By her own hands, in her own time, with the help of people who asked nothing in return, except that she keep going. Spring broke over the Montana mountains with meltwater and birdsong. The baby came on a Tuesday, just as the first wildflowers pushed through the thawing ground. Doc Bridges delivered her, a girl, red-faced and screaming, with Ellie's amber eyes and Caleb's stubborn chin. Ruth held Ellie's hand through the labor. Maggie paced the porch with Caleb until his sister finally snapped, "For the love of God, Caleb, sit down before you wear a trench in the floor." When Doc placed the baby in Ellie's arms, the room went still. "She's perfect," Ellie whispered. "She is," Caleb said, his voice rough as gravel. "What's her name?" Ellie looked at her daughter, at the tiny fingers gripping the air, at the fierce, squalling face that demanded the world pay attention. "Clara," she said, "after the woman who was brave enough to speak the truth." "Clara Thornton," Caleb said. He touched his daughter's cheek with one rough finger, and the baby grabbed it and held on. He looked at Ellie, at the woman who'd arrived broken and left standing, at the scars on her arms that she no longer hid, at the strength in her eyes that had been there all along, buried under years of pain, waiting for someone to give it room to breathe.
"Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For answering my ad, for getting on that stagecoach, for carrying a knife in your sleeve, and checking the cylinder of a gun, and telling your brother to go to hell on the steps of a church." His voice cracked. "For choosing me when you didn't have to. For making this cabin into a home and this valley into a life worth living." Ellie reached up and touched his face. "You said something to me the day I arrived. The first thing you ever said to me that mattered." "I remember." "Say it again." Caleb leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, their daughter cradled between them. "You're not alone now," he whispered. "Neither are you," she whispered back. And in a small cabin in the Montana Territory, in the spring of 1883, a family began. Not born from perfection, born from survival, from courage, from the stubborn, scarred, beautiful refusal to let the worst of the world have the final word. Ellie Thornton had arrived in Copper Bluff with blood on her face, a letter in her hand, and nothing left to lose. She'd found everything, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure that every woman who came after her found the same thing: a locked door, a loaded gun, a chair at the table, and the words that had saved her life, spoken by a quiet rancher on a dusty platform in the middle of nowhere. "You're not alone now. Not ever again."